Okay, so I'm gonna do a Coinbase, MicroStrategy, and Robinhood update. So we're gonna start with Coinbase. We're gonna start with the weekly chart, and the first thing I'm gonna point out here is the Fibonacci from the all-time high back at the IPO back here and to the low. And we can see that the Fibonacci is in a new trading range, right? If we take off this again, we can see that it's in a new trading range from the 50% level to the 618. So that's essentially 230 to 277. And now it's approaching that 277. And most likely it'll get there before any kind of rejection. And we can see that it hit there before and got rejected. So what would be nice to see is some kind of bullish engulfing candle to close above that level and then flip it to support to be in a new trading range between this 277 and the 314. So this is great to see that a couple of weeks ago, this big 18% weekly candle broke above it finally. So this development is very positive, but we need to realize that resistance is approaching. And when I put back on my GAN, it's also hitting that angle as resistance, which is the 45-degree angle. And when I zoom in here, you can see exactly how perfect that has been right here as a resistance, tried to flip it to a support, but could not, and it's resistance and resistance still. So we can see as it approaches this 618 level, as it gets closer and closer, it's hitting more and more resistance. So in order to break it, I think it's really going to take some kind of bullish engulfing candle to close above it and then come back down to backtest to continue higher and higher. So right now, it's closer to resistance than it is support. And if we even add on the Ichimoku here, we can see that the conversion line sits at 240. So that even sits a little bit below a lot below the current price, right? It's at 266, so a big $26 difference to below. So that is technically where support is, right? So will it go down there? It's not necessary, right? But just need to be more cautious at resistance than you are at support. So if price did get back down there, I would be a lot more bullish, right? So let's go check out Coinbase on log scale to get more confluence. So now I have Coinbase pulled up here on log scale. And one thing that I want to point out here is that this bottom from the January 2023 low, this angle right here has been a perfect support and resistance angle for a long time. We can see that it was support, then resistance, then support, then resistance, then support, and now once again it is resistance. So this is basically the same thing as on linear scale, that this is just riding this angle up as resistance. But one thing I want to point out is that each level has been hit perfectly. And this level right here was a resistance, and tried to flip it as support, resistance, and then finally it broke free as a resistance, and this orange level was support and never looked back. And then now the same thing is happening with this blue level, where it was a resistance here, and then it was flipping it to a support. And once again, it lastly flipped it to a support. So now it's going to take off higher and higher. And it looks like this is now officially flipped to a support. So with that said, even though we know that resistance is approaching around that 277 level, around these angles, it looks like price is going to gravitate to the next level. And the next level does sit up here around 545, maybe around 550 or so. So that will be the target for possibly next year or beyond, right? I don't really know time. So anything could happen. It could just explode higher sooner, or it could take more time to get to that 540 level. So essentially, this is a very bullish chart with a lot of higher highs, higher lows. So short term, there is resistance, but long term, this looks like it wants to trend higher, and possibly we might get that bullish engulfing candle sooner to go higher and break this angle back to support and continue higher and higher. So that is something I am looking out for. That is something that is possible. But I just wanted to point out that even though it is getting close to a resistance level, this chart is extremely bullish, and I think eventually it's going to go to 540 and beyond. And even the next level becomes possible up here around maybe 1400, right? So I don't think it'll just stop here. I think it's really going to continue higher and higher because this chart is extremely bullish. There's just going to be some resistance along the way. And even before it gets to this green level, there's going to be resistance with these candles over here around the 350s, and the all-time high is also going to be some resistance there around the lower 400s. So again, chart looks great, but just a little more patience before it's able to break that resistance level. And next I have MicroStrategy, and this is pulled up on the weekly chart on linear scale. And instead of a Gann square, I have a Gann box pulled up just to show a lot more angles sloping upwards and sloping downwards and different levels as well. So if we look from the very bottom right here in 2020, we can see how symmetrical this has been just with these angles, right? We can see that it came up here to the blue level perfectly, that even that angle sloping down perfectly. We can see that all these angles sloping up, you can see how well it rode this angle. You can see how well it held that angle. You can see how well it held the very last angle. And then it went up through all these angles one at a time, right? Even that one was a perfect resistance. And this was a perfect resistance, right? And we can see what I mean by bullish engulfing candles, like I said with Coinbase, like this just cut through all of this resistance here, right? We can see that orange level. We can see all these angles. We can see this gigantic 57% weekly candle just cutting through all this resistance, and it just kept going higher and higher through the blue level, through this green level. And now we can see something similar to what's happening to this bullish engulfing candle. It cut through all this resistance levels, and now it's even trying to break through this downward sloping angle right here to flip it to support to continue higher. So if I zoom in a little bit, I can show you that this downward sloping angle is trying to be flipped to support, right? And it did even try to backtest this green level. And basically what's happening now is it's trying to find a new base for a continuation higher. And if I even add on the Ichimoku here, we can see that it even held that conversion line down here as a support and just took off. So we know this chart is very bullish. It's very 100% bullish. There's nothing bearish about it. And if it can close above this level right here, around current price, around 1777 or higher, I think it has a chance to go up to this angle above right here, and this angle sloping down. And that kind of sits around 2000, right? 1970 or even 2000 up here, depending on time. But ultimately, we see this green level going across. I'll just take off the Ichimoku, make it more clear. We see this green level going across, so it's most likely, in my opinion, it's going to go up to this 2000, maybe 2100 level next, right? But I don't think it'll stop there because this chart, once it breaks above this wick, it'll most likely continue higher, and we might see, or I might see bullish engulfing candles close above more levels in the future. And let's just go to the log scale version to see some more confluence. And now I have MicroStrategy on log scale. And the first thing I want to show you here is the Fibonacci pulled from the .com 2000 high and the low. And even though it is like a different business model now than it was back then, it's still following the symmetry of the fibs and also the Gann perfectly. And I'll show you the Gann in a little bit, but first the fib. And we can see that once this Fibonacci 50% level, once it held as support, it never looked back. And then it went up to the 786, got rejected as usual, almost back down to the 50% level. Then right now it's at the 886, and it's actually trying to flip that to a support right now. It was a resistance, and it is flipping it as support currently. So if it does, then that's going to almost guarantee, in my opinion, that it's going to go up to this one level, the 3368 level next. So even though we can see that there is some resistance in the current price all the way up to the 2000 zone, right? It's most likely going to break that, and it's going to go to this 3368 zone. And if I even put back on the Gann, I can show you here that it is approaching another resistance level, and that resistance level is going to be this arc up above, right? Before it gets to this 3368 level, the resistance level above does sit currently around 2,300, maybe 2,400, right? So that could be some resistance there before price flips that arc to support to go up to this very last Fibonacci level where the all-time high was, right? And if that went through time, say it took some time to flip that level to support, then that could be maybe September of 2025 where this all-time high meets that top arc, right? So that could take maybe another year or so to get there, but it is looking very, very bullish right now because it is above that 886 level. So just going to take some time, but I think the main thing you really want to look at here is this blue level right here. I'll take off the Fibonacci. The blue level right here was a resistance. Now it is a support. Also, this 45-degree angle was a support, then it became a resistance, and now it's once again a support. So we have two confluences that this is now a support, and it most likely is not going to go lower than this. And right here, back in July, early July, it was proof that it's not going to go lower because it held perfectly, and that's why price took off. So we have this confluence right here that price is looking really good. Next level is 2,300. Then after that, the all-time high is around 3,300. And then where does the next level sit, right? See, this blue level was hit perfectly. What about the orange level? That was a very important zone too, right? Support and resistance. And the last time it held it as support back in 2010, it really never looked back. And where does the next level sit? The next level does sit here around 20,000 for MSTR. So I'm not saying it's going to get there anytime soon, but if it did follow this 45-degree angle all the way up, because you can see how important that angle has been, possibly it could get there maybe like 2035, 36 or so, right? That 20,000 level. So that's probably another decade away. So we don't want to really get too excited about that level yet because it has these resistance levels before then, right? And even if I put back on that the Fibonacci, where do those extensions line up? So I put the Fibonacci extension back up, and the 1.272 equals exactly that green level. So this is more confluence, guys, that this is probably going to happen. But I'm not going to say it's going to happen soon. Like I said, it could happen the next decade or so. So this is perfect, right? Then after that, the 1.414 is at 53,000 and so on and so forth. But possibly they might split the stock before that happens. But I just want to show you how when you put on these Gann squares to put on the Fibonacci, when the levels match up perfectly, it's just more proof, in my opinion, that that is going to happen sometime in the future. But yeah, the bottom line is this chart is really bullish. Once Bitcoin breaks out into all-time highs, I believe MicroStrategy will get to this 3368 level pretty quickly, and then after that, it'll just keep going higher and higher until ultimately gets to this $20,000 level. And next, we're going to do Robinhood, and I'm also going to be using only the Gann box for this one to show every single angle that has existed with this chart. And essentially, it's very, very symmetrical with especially this angle right here. We can see that it was a resistance angle right here. And now it looks like it's trying to be a support angle with today's weekly candle and last week and whatnot. But even if that angle doesn't hold as a support, I can see right here this orange level is looking like a new support, and that is around 2270 or maybe a little bit below. So if price ever got back down there, I would like that a lot, right? So it's basically pretty close to that price. But we can also see with this downward sloping angle right here that it's also a resistance with these wicks above, right? So This is the orange level that is holding as a support. And then when we look above, there's some more resistance with these arcs coming up here. And eventually the next 25% level of that Gann box does sit around 26, maybe 2660 or so. So it is riding this nicely. I think there is a clearly defined support level there. I think there's also a clearly defined resistance up here at 26. So it's just going to take some time to break through these barriers to get to that $26 level. And if I put on the Ichimoku here, I can also point out that 2247 is the conversion line, which is almost lining up perfectly with that orange level here. So I think that's even more confluence that this level should hold for price to continue higher. So essentially $23, $22.50, that is basically around a buy zone, a demand zone for price to continue higher and higher. So this chart does look bullish for the future, and we can clearly see that there are some resistance levels before it gets to that 2660. So now let me put on the log scale to show you more. Now here's Robinhood on log scale, and one thing that I can show you is this is the 45-degree angle, and this has been a support and a resistance and now it is looking like it is support again. And when we go down to the 45, that sits around 2210, maybe 2220, 30. That is right around that 2250 zone as well, which is even additional confluence that this is a great support zone, in my opinion, for price to continue to the next or the first level. And the first level of this chart does sit here around $31.50, $32 or so. So on the linear scale, we can see that the next level is 2660, but on log scale, once that 2660 gets broken, then the first level here does sit around 3150. So using the linear scale, using the log scale, you can clearly see where all the support and resistance levels are going to be in the future. And for log scale, it just tells you a little bit longer out where price should hit. And if it does follow along this 45-degree angle, that means possibly this 3150 level could get hit here by March of 2025. And that could be a good resistance level for some time before it breaks out. So since this chart is really bullish, I don't see any fear of coming back down to retest these levels anytime, simply because of all the confluence on linear scale and log scale. So I believe price is approaching support very, very near for a continuation higher. And just for fun, where does the next level sit after this $31? Well, the next level does sit here around $145. So that is something I think to look forward to in the future, $145. And if it did follow that 45-degree angle all the way up, that would be possibly by 2027, right? Not too far in the future, really. So just something to think about. If Bitcoin explodes into the hundreds of thousands, then that will also benefit Robinhood to get to these high levels as well. So essentially, with all of these charts, with Coinbase, MicroStrategy, and with Robinhood, you can see clearly that price is approaching some temporary resistance, but all of them are holding support perfectly. And I believe all of them will continue higher and higher and break through each resistance level one at a time.